Thank you very much to everyone who's joining me here today. I'd like to start by sharing a theory with all of you. This isn't a theory that's going to revolutionize product management or change the tech world forever. At least I don't think it is. But it may just change how you think about your relationships with friends, family, and loved ones. My theory is that there are two types of people in the world. Just two. Two types of people and they are fundamentally incompatible. You can forget Myers-Briggs, you can forget Jungian archetypes, you can forget BuzzFeed quizzes which tell you which character from Friends you most resemble or what Hogwarts house you belong in. Today, I'm going to share with you probably the most important indicator for the long-term success of any relationship. Now, I call this the scale of aversion to cinematic revelations and early disclosures, or more succinctly, how do we feel about spoilers? Far more than the shared political views or taste in music, the thing we should consider most of all at the start of any relationship is whether you share a compatible spoiler philosophy. And as I said, there are two types of people. The first type of person will go to great lengths to avoid any kind of foreknowledge about TV shows, films, books, theatrical performances, sports events, anything where the outcome is not typically intended to be known upfront. They value an experience that is pure and unsullied, where the journey is all the sweeter for the unexpected twists and turns along the way, and the palpable sense of anticipation around an unknown outcome is both desirable and satisfying. To have this information shared with them beforehand spoils the event in a really meaningful way, removing its value, making it unappealing, and turning the world into a less joyful place. So what about the second group? Well, for them, the anticipation of the unknown isn't quite so appealing. When a new movie is announced, they follow reports on casting decisions, join fan groups to speculate on the plot, and share leaked footage and insights from the set. And when they come to watch the movie, they can relax, free in the knowledge that nothing is going to surprise them. They can look for the small details, make connections in their heads with what they've learned beforehand, and let the story unfold in front of them. Now, there's a sidebar to this theory, which is that product people, like ourselves, are far more likely to fall into this second category. Our success depends on us wading through a mass of unknowns and uncertainty, building a coherent vision, wrestling the future into something manageable and under our control. We like to know things. We don't like surprises. So it's with that in mind that I'm going to present a spoiler warning to you all now, because I'm going to present the conclusions of this talk up front. No surprises, no tricks. I'm going to share these outcomes with you now, and as the talk unfolds, I'd like you to keep them in mind. Think about how they relate to your own experiences and whether my examples ring true for you. So, I have three main conclusions. First thing, there's been a lot of talk this year about remote working, and I even mention it in the title of this talk. It's a new experience for a lot of people, and that brings with it an understandable sense of unease, periods of readjustment, and the development of new professional norms. For some, these challenges are a confirmation that remote working simply doesn't work. It doesn't produce the results they need. But when it comes to success for our products and ourselves as product people, this fixation on remoteness is a total red herring. There's nothing magic about co-location. What actually matters for success are the same things that have always mattered. Alignment on shared goals, the expertise to deliver, and a collective sense of ownership. Working in the same room can act as a proxy for these things and make you believe that effective work is occurring. That simply means that your problems are hidden and easier to ignore. Without that filter, you're forced to confront those weaknesses and develop strategies to deal with them. My second conclusion, however, is that while focusing on remoteness as a cause of poor performance is a distraction compared to those real issues of alignment, expertise, and ownership, neither is it a silver bullet to fix a broken organizational culture. And this is a mistake I see from some of the more zealous advocates for remote working, that because it works for them individually or for their company, that it will automatically benefit every business to make that same switch. And I've already said that co-location can paper over the cracks in an organization's culture, and that remoteness can force a business to confront those underlying issues. But this can only happen if the fundamentals of a strong, resilient culture are in place. Adaptable, effective processes, a bias towards collaboration and openness, and the trust and psychological safety required to raise and resolve issues without confrontation. Those are the fundamentals of a strong relationship, and location is very much a secondary concern. And my third conclusion is that there are actually things that we can do to build the kinds of relationships that we want, both in work and in life more generally. Sometimes, when we talk about organizational culture, change can feel either so dramatic that it appears simply unattainable, or it's something we believe has to be imposed from the top down, i.e., it's someone else's problem. Now, of course, there needs to be leadership, but there are practical things that each of us can do to begin the process of building resilient, productive, long-term relationships. They're not complex things. In some respects, they're quite simple, but they need to be done deliberately, consistently, and with intention. Now, I'm going to get to what these things actually are, but first we need to consider a really important question. Why do relationships fail? And in fact, this is probably the wrong question altogether, and what we should really be asking is, why do relationships succeed? There is an assumption, I think, that success is a relationship's default state, that all things being equal and assuming we avoid error or mistreatment, that a relationship will last indefinitely. This is the social norm, whether we're talking about romantic partners or friendships or our relationships with family members. The social expectation is that these should be long-term, that the strength of feeling should either remain constant or even increase over time, and that they should remain an important part of our lives despite all the changes that invariably occur along the way. And we see this in the moral panic over rising divorce rates, in the demonization of single parents, and the endless magazine articles about friends moving on after college and estranged siblings making peace after 30 years' silence. The success of a relationship relies on everyone involved to be committed to that relationship's success. It doesn't just happen. It requires deliberate, proactive investment of time and emotional energy from all parties. It's important as well to separate being comfortable in a relationship with being complacent. Being comfortable in a relationship is a good thing because it denotes a sense of trust and psychological safety. But complacency indicates that the commitment of time, emotional energy, and a dedication to maintaining a shared understanding has fallen by the wayside. And as it is for our personal relationships, so it is for our work relationships. But maybe this all sounds just a bit too abstract. I mean, we're product people after all, and one of our favorite things to do is to build user profiles. So with that in mind, let me introduce two good friends of mine. This is Ben. He's in his 30s. He started life as a web developer before switching to product management about 4 years ago, although he's only been working remotely for the last 6 months. He has a craft beer subscription. He enjoys watching YouTube videos about woodworking and owns at least 5 different bicycles. I expect many of us know someone like Ben. And this is Laura. She's in her 30s as well and has a similar professional background to Ben, starting in engineering before switching to product management. But unlike Ben, she's been working remotely for the last 3 years. She also enjoys Mexican food and plays roller derby on weekends. Now, Ben and Laura are both product managers. They've both had their fair share of successes and failures in their careers so far, but since starting new remote product jobs at separate companies in the last 6 months, they've had very different experiences. For Ben, he's found himself in a constant cycle of calls with senior stakeholders, being questioned on the work he's been doing and his team's progress. Some of those stakeholders have been circumventing the agreed processes, either going above his head to his boss or directly messaging the development team. The team themselves appear demotivated and underperforming, and Ben feels an increasing pressure to overpromise and overcommit. It's been a stressful 6 months for Ben. I'm sure we've all experienced at least some of these issues at one time or another. As for Laura, well, she's been able to get stakeholder buy-in for product improvements that she's identified and has successfully pushed back during moments when those priorities were being challenged. The processes that she's put in are, by and large, being followed, and her team seems motivated and engaged with their work. There have been 1 or 2 occasions where deadlines have been missed or OKRs haven't quite hit their mark, but overall she's felt supported and not under too much pressure. 2 people doing very similar jobs, but with very different work experiences. So, where has it all gone wrong for Ben? He's not a bad person, and he's not a bad product manager. He's had plenty of successes as a PM throughout his career. And while I do think that luck plays a bigger role in our careers than most people are comfortable acknowledging, I don't think that's what's happening here either. We can speculate on the details, but like most relationship problems, it probably boils down to communication. When we embark on a new relationship with someone, Perhaps not on the first date, but hopefully by the fourth or fifth, it's important to talk about expectations. What do we want out of this relationship? What are our goals for the future? And if this conversation doesn't happen, then it can be weeks, months, or even years in the worst case before you realize that your relationship is doomed to fall apart. And as product people, we have a responsibility to set ourselves up for success. And it's entirely possible here that Ben did not do his due diligence. In the excitement or desperation of finding a new job, it's all too easy to skip the step of pinning down exactly how you are going to succeed. Are you and your new colleagues aligned on what's important? Is there enough expertise in the organization to achieve those goals? And are you and your team going to be given ownership over objectives that are within your power to influence? Without agreement on those things, it doesn't matter how much you love your new company's products or what their mission is or whether you get free pizza on Fridays. It's only a matter of time before things start to fall apart. Now, we need to drive those conversations up front from the beginning. Now, I've spoken a lot about what we as individuals can and should be doing to build the working relationships we want, and that is absolutely intentional. I want each of us to leave this festival at the end of the day with a set of practical steps that can make us all better colleagues and more effective product managers. But businesses have a responsibility too. And in Ben's case, it's not enough to say that because he didn't push the issue on alignment, expertise, and ownership, that he was destined to fail, or that he deserves the stress he's dealing with now. Nailing those things is an important part of being a successful product manager, but he joined a company with an established culture. And sometimes there are things that emerge once you've started a job that you didn't know, couldn't know before, that greatly impact your chances of success. And if Ben came to me with these problems, I'd probably ask him the following questions. Does your employer know the value of your skills? Not, are you being paid enough? Because the answer to that question is always no. But do they know what value you're bringing to the company? And is this assessment shared broadly across the business? Have they hired you personally? Or are you just somebody filling a seat? Have you agreed the scope of your role? And has that changed since you signed your contract? What expectations are you trying to meet? Is this another one of those product manager roles that is actually a secret project manager job? Do you have agreed OKRs? Do you know what success looks like? And are the measures of success something you can reasonably expect to influence? And has the organization taken any responsibility for putting effective processes in place, incentivizing clear communication, encouraging collaboration, or building an environment of psychological safety? And if Ben answered mostly no to those questions, then the company has not lived up to their side of the bargain, and Ben has almost certainly got no chance of success, whatever he tries. Being a professional product person means that sometimes we are going to have to do most of the running. We're going to encounter organizations that haven't worked with product people before, or have had bad experiences, or don't understand how best to get value from the skills that we've got. That's normal, and it comes with the rations. Not every company is going to be perfectly set up for how we work and what we bring to the table, and we just have to deal with that. Part of our job is advocating for our own existence. But when all the cards are stacked against you, when you simply aren't set up for success, sometimes you just have to cut yourself some slack. We ask an awful lot of ourselves as product people, and we are used to swimming against the tide, trying to influence people and get things done without formal authority. But we cannot, in fact, we should not be doing all of this by ourselves. So that's Ben. He's had a tough time this year, haven't we all? But I'm sure he'll find a new role that works better for him. So, what about Laura? Well, this is where we return to my third conclusion, that there are simple, uncomplicated actions that, if we internalize them, are consistent with them, and deploy them deliberately and intentionally, we can have working relationships that not only make our lives easier, but make us more effective, successful product people. I mentioned that Laura has been working remotely for a couple of years, and she's realized that when you remove the crutch of co-location, you really need to double down on these fundamentals. You'll note that while I said that these fundamentals are simple and uncomplicated, I didn't say that they're easy. They're actually pretty hard. The fact that people so often fail to do them really speaks to that. But the reason they're hard isn't because they're technically demanding or require expertise in the five-dimensional chess of company politics. They're hard because they make us emotionally vulnerable. They require us to face difficult feelings, to avoid the temptation of easy answers, to overcome our desire to be people pleasers, and to stay focused on doing the right thing when it feels like the whole world is pushing you in the other direction. There are 5 fundamental behaviors that Laura has used to make the first 6 months at her new job so successful. The first fundamental, and one that is particularly important when you're working remotely, is to be intentional with your time. One of the things that people talk most about when they say that remote working doesn't work for them is the loss of those ad hoc interactions. The chats by the coffee machine, bumping into a colleague on the stairs, the informal scoping sessions that happen over lunch, all the interactions that feed into effective collaboration. But remember what I said about co-location papering over the cracks in organizational culture? Reliance on those ad hoc occurrences to smooth the path of product development is an anti-pattern that remote working exposes. And the way to overcome this anti-pattern is to be deliberate and intentional with your time. Schedule time to speak with people in your calendar and make this a priority. When you speak to people in these sessions or turn up to meetings, respect everyone's time, including yours, by being as prepared as you possibly can. Everyone hates those meetings which don't have a clear agenda, especially right now. So be that person who has something to say, has anticipated questions in advance, and come prepared to answer them. When you're working remotely, these meetings are the only time your stakeholders will see you. They don't see you laughing with the receptionist or giving inspiring speeches to your team or arriving early or working late, all those things that humanize you. Make these moments count by treating time like the important resource that it is. Fundamental number 2. Making sure that people feel heard is ultimately a question of empathy, of being able to put yourself in the position of someone else and understand their feelings and motivations. As product people, we're often in a position where other people in our organization will come to us with things that they want doing. And this can be a challenge for us when we think that our job is about focusing on the key strategic priorities and long-term goals, and we see these requests as a distraction. What we need to understand and demonstrate that we understand is that people aren't coming to us with these requests because they want us to be busy or because they're too lazy to do the work themselves. They come to us because they see us as agents of change, someone with the ability to help them with a problem. They have bosses breathing down their necks looking for answers that they cannot provide on their own. They have their own quarterly objectives to hit and need your input to make that happen. They're probably stressed, they may well be feeling insecure, and how we treat people who come to us in these circumstances tells us a lot about ourselves and builds the foundation for our relationship with those people going forwards. And this isn't to say we should drop everything or agree to every ad hoc request that comes in, but being an active listener, demonstrating that you empathize with their position, showing that you've understood that their goals are important and their problems are legitimate. Once you've done that, you're in a much stronger position. If you want people to follow your processes, you have to show that they are going to work for them. Making them feel heard and that they're not being fobbed off with excuses is a good start. When people don't feel heard or see you as obstructive, they will find other, more disruptive ways of getting your attention. And the other side of this is deciding when you can do something to help others and how you approach that decision. You are only one person. You cannot solve everyone's problems, and it is not your job or in your interest to be the person who tries to solve everyone's problems. What you can do, however, is decide when to stick rigidly to your priorities and when to look at the bigger picture. This is the third fundamental behavior of building effective working relationships. There will be occasions when the best response to a stakeholder's request is, let's just do it. Maybe it's a small change and the disruption of context switching really isn't so bad in the scheme of things, or maybe you can bundle it up with some other work as you would any other small feature, and that's fine too. But the pattern I'd encourage is to look for opportunities to help people help themselves. Rather than picking up quick wins in the hopes of garnering appreciation from your stakeholders, it can sometimes be wise to look at the circumstances behind the request. Why did this come to you, and what resources do you have to solve the problem, not just for now, but to make sure that you don't see more of these requests in the future? And that could mean a number of things. Maybe that means building a data dashboard so stakeholders don't need to ask you to look things up. Maybe that means providing test accounts so that they can see the features in development, or empowering someone in their team to raise PRs. If your reflex is to look at improving the process, not just making short-term fixes, you will be well on your way to building high-performance working relationships. The fourth fundamental behavior will, I hope, come as no surprise to anyone listening to this talk today. The importance of early collaboration is drummed into us from the moment we begin our professional careers, whether you start off as a product manager or an engineer or in QA or design or something else altogether. If you want to get buy-in from someone on a piece of work, involve them from the very beginning, even if it's just asking for their opinion. Yet somehow this remains a really common problem that becomes even more important without those ad hoc interactions that occur in an office. And I can understand why. Involving people early requires a level of trust and psychological safety that some organizations just don't have. The earlier on in a process you are, the fewer facts you're likely to have, the more uncertainty you're dealing with, and the more vulnerable you are. And it takes courage to put yourself in that position. And I'm not saying you need to bring the CEO in on your first discovery session, but remember what I said about people not liking surprises. Don't turn up to a meeting where getting approval from someone is your goal without making sure that person has been well informed along the entire process. If you put someone on the spot in front of other stakeholders, asking them to commit time or money to your product without involving them beforehand, then your pitch had better blow them away. Otherwise, you had better prepare for disappointment. Ask for opinions and ideas. Ask for feedback on prototypes. Run demos. Bring people in on wireframing sessions. Share your user research. Be open. Collaborate. And the fifth, final fundamental behavior for building high-performance relationships is to protect your integrity at all costs. Nothing is more important to your relationships with anyone, either in the work context or in personal relationships, than being known as someone with integrity. And nothing is more damaging to your relationships than being known as someone without integrity. Throughout this talk, I've spoken about trust, about emotional vulnerability, about empathy and psychological safety. None of that is possible if people don't believe what you say. Integrity is your secret weapon, your superpower for building the relationships you want. And I should say, this isn't just about not being devious or manipulative or acting in bad faith. This can happen so easily, even when we're well-intentioned, or perhaps even because we're well-intentioned, especially if you know that you're a people pleaser. Think about all those times that you've been asked a question and you don't really know the answer, or you've been asked to commit to a deadline by a senior stakeholder that deep down you know you can't meet, but everyone else in the room is nodding along happily. The urge to be evasive, to obfuscate, to say no in a way that sounds like, yeah, that can be overwhelming. Cultivate and cherish a reputation for only committing to what you are sure you can deliver. You will feel pressure to overcommit. Resist this with all your energy. If deadlines start to slip, you will feel an urge to postpone sharing this information for fear of reprimand or embarrassment. Suppress that urge. Once you've lost someone's trust, you will need to work very hard indeed to regain it. And that's it. Those 5 behaviors were what made Laura's first 6 months in her new job go so smoothly. She was intentional with her time, made sure that people felt heard, took opportunities to grease the wheel, shared progress early, and cultivated a reputation for integrity. Now, as I approach the end of this talk, here are my conclusions one more time. Being remote is a red herring. What matters is alignment, expertise, and ownership. Going remote will not fix a broken culture. It will just expose how broken it is. And we have the power to build better relationships for ourselves. Oh, but there is just one last thing. At the start of this talk, I shared my theory about the 2 types of people and their feelings on spoilers. And I said that product managers don't like to be surprised. Well, it turns out we're also really bad at following our own rules, because I do have one further conclusion that I want to share with you today. A lot of people have switched to remote working this year, whether they wanted to or not, and in circumstances that, to put it mildly, have been far from ideal. The point has been made that we shouldn't really consider this working from home at all, but rather working during a pandemic, out of the ordinary and with little preparation, and I have a lot of sympathy with that argument. But if this is going to be our future, then it is incumbent upon all of us to hold ourselves and our organizations to a higher standard. This is not just about keeping people in jobs and making sure businesses survive. This is about building workplaces, whether remote or co-located, that work for everyone. And we all have a responsibility to make that happen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks. Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for your insight here. I think I completely agree with you that we have been forced, whether we like it or not, into a new era of working remotely, and that really this is probably not temporary, right? This is kind of like a fundamental shift in the way we work, and it's going to kind of require innovation on so many of our personal and organizational parts. So I wanted to say that you have a couple questions that have come in on here, so I want to pass those along to you.
Fantastic.
So first of all, we have Philip, who is saying thank you and everybody at Raspberry Pi for all the work and the passion and commitment to making CS more accessible. He says, great talk. Do you believe that remote working is the new default? And do you believe that all people can be set up to work from home?
Ooh, really good question. And I think I have to tap into my background as a sociologist here, because I think what we've seen really through this year, and this is the point I make about the lack of preparation and this being out of the ordinary, is that there are some people who really have a really distinct advantage and privilege in this situation. I'm very fortunate, for example. I chose to work from home even before the start of this year. I have a spare room which can act as an office, and that was a decision I made deliberately. So that was ideal for me. But many people I've seen this year are just not in that position, and it requires a certain level of privilege to say, I have the space, I have the time, I have the facilities to work effectively from home. So as much as I talk about relationships here, which I still think is the fundamental element of remote working, we're talking about infrastructure changes here, which really should be a matter of priority for the governments and companies of the world to ensure that in a world where climate change is going to be an increasing challenge, where a commitment to reducing things like commuting to try and reduce pollution is a concern, and of course the global pandemic, which we've experienced for the first time now and may experience again in the future, ensuring that we have the infrastructure to remote work effectively from home for everyone is going to be a really important thing to achieve.
Agreed. Thank you. We have a couple more that came in here. So a first comment from Madeline, great presentation skills. Yes, we see that.
Thank you.
And another one from Jerome here. It says, it takes two to tango in any relationship. How does one overcome situations where the need to engage and have the conversation is not there from the other side? Any practical tips?
That's a really interesting question. I suppose the way that I've tried to approach this talk is to talk about how we can embody particular behaviors. That if we set an example of how we should be behaving ourselves, then that will lift the level or raise the level of debate among our colleagues who are working with. If we find that colleagues who we're trying to communicate with are not reciprocating, I think it's important to understand why that is. In my experience, it's not typically just because they're misanthropes and they just don't want to talk. Perhaps they have experienced bad experiences previously when they've perhaps opened themselves up vulnerably and tried to build a sense of trust with someone, and that's left them disappointed. So it's important to understand where people are coming from in these conversations as well. So trying to get to that point and showing that you are willing to make yourself emotionally vulnerable as the first step can be a real way to offer an olive branch in those situations.
Cool. I'm going to close with one final question here. The title of your talk has the word water cooler in it, and it's definitely kind of from the physical space. Is there any kind of metaphorical water cooler that exists in the virtual world that we could latch onto?
I've seen lots of people try to replicate this kind of sense of spontaneous conversation or kind of these ad hoc interactions, which I mentioned. I'm not sure I've seen them been done really successfully. What I've seen and what we've tried to do at Raspberry Pi, for example, is try and very deliberately have social spaces where we can have those kinds of conversations. And sometimes they can feel a little cheesy. We have quiz events and after work drinks and so forth. Trying to kind of grease the wheels in another kind of setting. To do that in a really kind of spontaneous way whilst working remotely is quite challenging, I think. Maybe there's a technological solution to that, but really it sounds like it's a social problem. The only thing I can say is the point about being deliberate with your time is not just about communicating work things, but it's about building those relationships in a very deliberate way as well. So dedicating the time to that, I think is probably the best way to try and replicate those sorts of feelings.
Yes, even if it happens in the meetings that you have with people one-on-one.
Precisely.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Daniel, for taking us through what it takes to work effectively in this remote era. We're all in this kind of innovative time together, even here on this Product Management Festival on the online version. So thank you very much once again, and we can move to our break.